Welcome back to Open Line. I'm here with Ron Schultes from the Beacon Center. We're talking about this, the Pork Report exposing government waste, fraud, and abuse. And there are examples from all over the state, 25 examples for this year for 2019 of government waste. How do you guys come up with this list?
Really comes from three main sources. One is news stations like yourselves and newspapers all across the state. The other is the state budget. In moments of insomnia, we'll crack that open and read through the state's budget. And then the last major source is the state's comptroller, which is kind of like the state's money cop. He's responsible for auditing different departments, providers, and investigating fraud. And so it's a combination mostly of those three sources that we use to create this report every year.
Yeah, we had the comptroller in not too many weeks ago, and we were talking about Nashville's budget. So still a money issue there. And we were talking before the show. I had a question because we ran a news story just this week about how the comptroller has exposed, much like this, millions of dollars in government waste, but just how very little of it is recouped. And you guys have taken some action on this.
That's right. It's very difficult, first of all, to get that lost money back, obviously. But one of the things that we had the opportunity to work on was last year during the legislative session with the administration. We helped work on a law that our advocacy arm worked on a law that mandated mandatory clawbacks for all of the incentive deals that the state gives. So
explain that.
So for example, let's say we give $100 million to Amazon, right? And they're promised to hire 5,000 jobs. If they don't do so, most of our grants would require them to then give some of that money back because they didn't meet their end of the deal. But not all of them did. And so what we did is put it in law that all of the grants that the state gives out now are mandated to have these types of clawbacks for those economic development incentives.
I mean, it really seems like a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
But it took some work to get it in there.
It did. And I mean, we saw this even earlier this year with Electrolux that was given lots of money, and then I think it was several years later, closed up shop and they left. And that was money down the drain, wasted, that we're on the hook for, taxpayers are, and there's nothing we can do about it. And so that will solve that part of the problem going forward, luckily.
Absolutely. It is Open Line, so I want to get to the lines. Cleo is our first caller of the night. Cleo, thank you for being with us.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
How you doing?
Great.
I live in Antioch and have done so for the last 12 years. Moved here from Chattanooga. I have a problem with the school system. You know, we're building all these fields. We got hockey, we got this, they got, you know, I'm not against the things that are coming here. It makes us like an international city. We can do things that everybody else does. But our children going to school walk ditches and grass and, you know, snakes and all kind of stuff. They don't cut the grass. I'm wondering when they're going to do something about sidewalks. You know, bus service. I know we can't do anything about bus service. You all say every day we don't have enough bus drivers. But when are we going to do things for the schools? Not the teachers, for the schools. Makes no sense for these kids to have to be in these little temporary buildings. What if a tornado comes through? What's going to help them?
I hear you, Cleo.
I'm through fussing.
Thank you, Cleo. You know what? You and a lot of other people have the very same complaint, and you guys look not only, you know, at the government spending and where could that money be going. That's the big question mark. If it was used wisely, but even waste within Metro Nashville public schools.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've talked a lot about is there's this problem, particularly with school funding, in that the taxing authority is different than the spending authority. So our council is responsible for raising money and making those hard votes on whether or not we should raise taxes. And then essentially what happens is a blank check is cut to the school board, and then there's no way really for them to hold them accountable. And that's how, when you have that lack of accountability function, that's what leads to a lot of these issues. But then also it does go back to those misaligned priorities. One of the examples we mentioned is going back to the TIFs. A great example is right across from our office building is the Viridian, which is a beautiful high-rise condo. If you live in there, you have $2,600 in property taxes a year. 95% of it goes back into the TIF funding. Only 5% of the property taxes from that building go into the general fund for things like schools for children or roads or other things. And that's a problem when we're essentially subsidizing, and then because we've eroded that tax base, we can't capture the benefits of that growth.
And a lot of these TIF deals are for decades long.
That's right.
It's not something that we can just turn around and change.
That's right.
which is very sad. And of course, we've done a lot of reporting on this. Ben Hall has done tremendous reporting on this. We have seen some things that Mayor Cooper has decided to do, but it's not dealing with the TIF funding. It's dealing with other structures of, like, with the Music City Center, taking what was going over here and now putting it back in the general pot to recoup our budget mess this year.
Right. And those are certainly some good things and some good first steps. But this was a problem that has been created over decades, and it's going to take a long time to unwind some of these issues. And so, you know, we praise the mayor for that was a good first step. But you're right. I mean, when you talk about TIFs, a lot of it, the whole idea of it was to help with blighted areas.
Right.
Most people would be shocked to know that Lower Broadway is still considered a blighted area.
Why? How?
It's still defined as one, and so that area is still eligible for TIF funding. And I think anyone could say it's nowhere near close to blighted.
No.
Right? It's probably the most happening area of the state, obviously, and yet that's the problem with this system.
Wow. Do you think any TIF funds should be handed out from this point forward when it at least comes to, you know, the Nashville area and Davidson County?
I think what we've seen is growth is good. No one's going to say that, but at this point, we're not at the point where we need to pour gasoline on the fire. Organic growth is going to happen anyways, and that would be the best way to just let it happen. Focus on taking care of those core things, not pay out money in these TIF deals to hotels or other large corporations, and allow yourself to kind of have a healing process and recoup some of those funds to get your budget back in order.
Absolutely. Okay, we've talked about Metro Nashville Public Schools, we've talked about TIF, we talked about Amazon and their deal. NFL draft, everybody loved it. It brought gobs of people to town, lots of spending. You guys have a beef with it.
Absolutely, and for the record, I'm an NFL fan. I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, you know, green and gold all the way through. I was down there on Lower Broadway 2 out of the 3 nights. It's a fun environment, but NFL is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. We don't need to be paying them $3 million. And yes,
we paid them straight up $3 million to bring the draft here.
To bring the draft here. And certainly there were a lot of people that came to it. I think that it was more than double the previous record from Philly, I believe. But those people weren't coming because the NFL had the money to host it here. They came because they know Nashville's a fun city. That's not what was going to bring people to our streets. And so when we talk about a lack of funding, when we talk about the state potentially needing to come in and taking over Nashville's budget, $3 million can do a lot for that budget hole. And so we don't need to be giving it to the NFL. Is
it worth potentially losing something like the NFL draft because an Austin or a Denver or a San Francisco will pay that money or can pay that money, and we say, well, we're Nashville. People like to come here. It's a great example of the benefit seen versus the opportunity cost, the unseen benefits, right? How could that $3 million been paid to, over the long run, better educate our students, which then could lead to the next entrepreneur that creates that next new business that stays in Nashville, not just an NFL draft for the weekend that then hires more and more people. But because we see the shiny NFL, we don't see what we're missing out on, and that's what we argue, and that creates long-term sustained change. Absolutely. You guys have put this report out for 14 years. Have you seen, when you have highlighted a specific example, have you seen government leaders go back the next year and the years before and go, well, let's try to make this better. Let's try to undo this mess we've created financially. Sure. We wish we didn't have to do this report, first of all. Unfortunately, our hand is kind of forced every year. We'd love for our elected officials to be more responsible with our dollars, and so we wouldn't even have to do this. But I think what we have seen through this report is more and more attention and skepticism with these incentive deals that we've talked about. And is this really worth the payoff? Do we really need to be taking our tax dollars and giving them to multi-billion-dollar corporations? I think we've seen over the years more and more attention and skepticism placed on that. Still obviously a long way to go, but I think we're starting to see a change in the dialogue. And I think that's what we saw in, for example, going back with some of the issues with the previous mayor and should we have been doing this and whatnot. And I think you're starting to see a change in the dialogue around that. Right, because we have to. We're in a $40 million hole right now, right? That's right. I mean, we have to do something, tough decisions. Our city's debt is more than twice the state government's debt. That is almost unfathomable. I mean, you really have to stop and think about that. Our city's debt is more than twice the state government's debt. Exactly. Oh, that's scary. It is. It really is scary. Okay, on that thought, we're going to take a break and let you digest that just a little bit. We're going to come back and talk more about this pork report. Go ahead and give us a call if you'd like, 615-737-PLUS.